So thank you everybody for being here and being a part of our very first webinar here with ACE Supporting Strategies and Opsfolio. We're very excited to kick this off with everybody. My name is Kyle. I'm with Supporting Strategies, and I get the pleasure to be the moderator for this webinar today. And I get to introduce to you our two panelists, who are some great people. So I'm going to start with Luke. Luke is a seasoned federal business development professional and partner leading the government contracting practice at ACE Business Development. He has extensive experience guiding small and mid-sized government contractors through the full acquisition lifecycle, from capture planning and proposal development to contract execution and compliance. Luke really specializes in helping firms interpret and apply the federal acquisition regulations, the FAR, which is what we're going to be hearing a lot about today, to strengthen a competitive positioning, pricing strategy, and post-award performance. His expertise spans FAR Part 15, which is contracting by negotiation, FAR Part 19, small business programs, and FAR Part 42, contract administration and audit services, ensuring that business development efforts align with regulatory and operational requirements. Now, on the other side, we've got Mr. Shahid. Shahid is an internationally recognized cybersecurity and risk management expert with nearly 2 decades of experience as a federal contractor, specializing in technical security, assurance, and compliance for agencies such as the Office of Management and Budget, the Department of Defense, and many others. Recipient of Federal Computer Week's prestigious Fed 100 Award, Shahid has led and advised on some of the government's largest secure collaboration and identity management initiatives work that directly supports the goals of Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, or CMMC. As chief architect, as a contractor for OMB's secure collaboration platforms, Shahid guided multi-factor authentication, identity assurance, and cross-agency compliance strategies. He's helped organizations achieve and maintain FISMA and FedRAMP compliance, conducted complex cybersecurity and threat assessments, and authored foundational chapters on cybersecurity risk and digital health risk management, drawing on decades of hands-on technical and policy experience. Shahid now helps organizations translate CMMC requirements into practical, effective security programs. So those are our panelists. Very excited to have you guys on today. So I'll start with an easy question. How's your week been? Anything exciting going on? And, we'll start there.
Thanks so much for having us, Kyle. It's a pleasure to be here and really excited for the conversation today about compliance, about each of the protocols. I think it's going to be a riveting conversation. As far as the week goes, it's been great. It's a Friday. I cannot complain on how the week went. Staying busy is always better than being bored. For things that are going great right now, honestly, Thanksgiving is just a week away, and I myself, that is one of my favorite holidays. I try to get a little bit of activity out beforehand, and then all the food in on the back half of the week. So things are great, and I'm looking forward to today and next week.
Yeah, same here, Kyle. Great intros. Looking forward to this conversation. And the big news this past couple of weeks has been that the Department of Defense / Department of War is revamping their entire procurement strategy. So lots of new content is coming out. So this conversation couldn't be more timely, not just about CMMC, but there's a lot going on in the way that the government wants to procure. And the two main things that we'll talk about today is that procurement is and will be changing quite a bit, primarily to help the government get to better technologies faster and easier and with less cost, without relying on large-scale incumbents as the past. And then number two, doing so in a secure manner. And that's what we'll talk about a lot today.
I love giving people little nuggets about the webinar before we even begin. So that's great. Well, before we kick things off and get into this monster that we call CMMC and everything relating to that, I want to start off a little bit with you, Luke, and look at the FAR compliance. So could you give, as best you can, a general overview of how being FAR compliant can influence contract success, if at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say I think general overview and FAR aren't typically words that go in the same sentence with one another, as the federal acquisition regulations are a dense topic. And so I'm hoping that I can at least shed a little bit of light on some of the sections that I think that might make the most sense for people to be thinking about top of mind every day. I think before we even go into those sections, though, I think there's two things I want to make abundantly clear. First is if you are looking at FAR compliance, it definitely makes sense for you to be talking to a legal professional as well, looking at how this translates into contract requirements, into things that you're attesting to the government. Again, always something. I'm a belt and suspenders type of person. You might be able to understand a lot of this, even if you're reading the FAR firsthand. But again, never hurts to consult a professional about something that is this important as, again, such as compliance. The second thing that I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up right at the top of our call today is that the FAR is actually undergoing a rewrite right now. So the conversation today is going to be a little bit more on FAR 1.0, the traditional one, the one that has been in effect, the one that most government contractors are used to playing within the rules of. But it needs to be known that FAR 2.0 is coming, and it's coming in hot. And so if you haven't really looked into that before, make sure that you're going to acquisition.gov, because as GSA is starting to do this FAR rewrite, they are actively releasing new sections, and they're not just releasing what is FAR 2.0, but they're showcasing what has changed in FAR 2.0 from FAR 1.0. So again, you should know what these new regulations are, and you should also understand how they're changing, because both of those are abundantly important for you to get to. So two things I want to make sure we chat about right at the beginning. But when it comes down to FAR compliance and, the actual, what you're saying in your question, which is how does FAR compliance really help out government contractors? How does it allow you to potentially get an edge on someone else? I think it honestly boils down to a couple of key buzzwords, but hey, you know what? We all love buzzwords in this industry, right? It comes down to predictability, credibility, and risk reduction. And the reason I say all of this is because the FAR points that we're going to be talking about here, FAR Part 15, FAR Part 19, FAR Part 42, it again, it's a lot about documentation. It's a lot about making sure that you understand what is happening in your own organization, and a lot about having the proof, having the artifacts, having the policies in place that you can turn back to them if you get in the position of an audit, or so that you can proactively showcase these artifacts, these documents to folks who may need them. So to dive into a little bit more of each of these sections, FAR 15, this is all about compliance when responding to proposals, is a good way for you to think about it. So ensuring that you are doing clean proposals, that you are not showing deficiencies, that you are open to the discussion, and that again, that you are able to adhere to all of the requirements that the government is putting in place. Sections L and M are really the types of compliance type areas that you need to be looking at in an individual solicitation to ensure that you're all set. So again, I always like to go and break down that is that sections L and M, make sure that you are looking at those in an individual solicitation. But when it comes down to that section of the FAR at large and compliance there's a couple of things that you need to think about. And again, it's all basic, but it's sometimes the basic things that you forget about. SAM.gov, the System for Award Management, that is where you've got to get started to make sure that you are adhering to all of these types of requirements in Part 15. You need to make sure that you're registered. You have a cage code. You have a UEI, that your representations and certifications, your reps and certs are up to date, and that you make sure that you know when they need to be renewed again on that annual cycle, so that you don't have GSA hounding you to make sure that your entity doesn't get removed from the system because you accidentally lapsed you being active. So again, as far as that compliance goes, it might be simple, but it's necessary and it's mandatory for you to be in the system for award management, so that, again, you're eligible, you're compliant, and that you can pick up awards. I want to turn here now to FAR Part 19. While very similar, and honestly, as I'm going to be talking about it, you're going to think it aligns with FAR Part 15. It's a little bit different, and it's all about the eligibility for small businesses, and specifically the set-asides there. We've all heard about a lot of the different socioeconomic categories, right? Women-owned small business, veteran-owned small business, service-disabled veteran-owned small business, a hub zone, an 8A. All of these are different designations that you can go to the Small Business Administration, SBA, and potentially get awarded to you, get allotted to you. And so with that, there's a lot of different requirements that go into you even being able to obtain these socioeconomic designations. And then with that, for you to, again, maintain them, update them, and ensure that you are, again, able to play around inside of these socioeconomic set-aside categories within an agency, within a procurement cycle, things of that nature. So, with that, It does sound very similar to FAR Part 15, but I would again try to look at them as FAR Part 19 is a little bit more of the entity and ensuring that you're doing everything there to be able to tag your entity as a certain organization, a certain status, where FAR Part 19 is you looking at the entity, but how does that entity compliance go into you being compliant on a particular opportunity? The last thing I want to talk about, which I think is going to be honestly a lot more of our discussion for today, is FAR Part 42, which is compliance in the post-award side of things, compliance and contract performance. This has everything to do with how are you handling information? How are you working with your contracting officer? Let's make sure everything is in place so that we can get CPARs in place. There's a lot of different things for you to be looking at in FAR Part 42, and that is really the ongoing management of your organization, your contract, the program, for you to stay in compliance for the protocols that they need you to have in place. So again, I think we'll be chatting a lot more about all of this, but that's just a little bit about some of the things you need to be taking into account for how FAR is going to help you get ahead of everyone else.
And Kyle, if you don't mind, let me just add in a few things that I've learned while being at OMB, where we were doing a lot of reviews for many, many different agencies. And whether it's a small business or a large business, the thing to recognize is that government rules are very well documented. And that advice that Luke was giving, which is understand those rules. Obviously, going to a lawyer, you almost always have to do that. You almost have to kind of like consider that as a requirement anyway. But today, you do have enough AI available with GSA making the proper documentation available. You can actually load up a 200-page document into Gemini, a 500-page document into Anthropic, a 50-page document into ChatGPT, and then ask it the questions. Like ask it the dumbest questions you can think of. Like, what the heck is the FAR? Why do I have to do this? And then if you ask those questions in the dumbest way possible, the AI will actually answer for you, knowing that you're asking, quote, the dumbest questions. So you are almost always going to be afraid to ask questions to an attorney or somebody like that because it's going to cost money. But just start playing with those in AI today. The second quick advice that I would give you is build immediately, as fast as you can, tonight, during this webinar, right after the webinar, what we call a evidence warehouse or evidence data room. So you have policies and procedures like Luke has mentioned. Those policies and procedures are just documents, but those documents are normally strewn about in emails or in a OneDrive here and a folder there. Build yourself a compliance data room. It's basically a folder that everybody shares, and you put all your policies, procedures, and evidence into one place. So when you ask your lawyer to check and instead of spending 9 hours on something, they'll spend 90 minutes on it because everything is in one place. So remember, you can use AI. Number two, build your, quote, evidence warehouse or data room as fast as you can, because as new things come in, you just put them in the evidence room, and then you don't have to worry about it. But number three is probably the most important advice, and that is that you don't trust even your attorney to know the new rules that are coming out. So somebody may have said that, oh yeah, I've been working in FAR and acquisitions, et cetera, for 30 years. None of that matters once the rule is brand new. And so when you see the brand new rules, one thing that I especially recommend to people who are not experts is don't just believe those so-called experts, because those experts are often using their prior expertise, not going back and reading the new documents. And that's why the AI part is helpful. That's why the evidence part is helpful. Because so I, for example, am a software engineer, but I've spent an enormous amount of time with attorneys. And as respected as they are, often they are using back experience, not what does the requirement say today. And so they're not going to be super creative. They're not going to be the ones that are going to give you all the new ideas about how to apply this, except over time. So Luke said some very, very important things, which is the FAR is changing and you got to prepare. But the preparation is actually a pretty blocking and tackling type of stuff. Is just get your documentation into one place, and that way your evidence is available to be able to be done. Now, Luke, Kyle, any comments on what I just mentioned?
I think the last thing that I'd want to say, and then, Kyle, I think you're going to hear this a lot, is this is actually very relevant to the conversation we're going to be having about CMMC as well, which is that, I think we all understand that, working inside of the federal marketplace, there's a lot going on. And as a small business, there's even a lot more going on for you. And we all know the age-old, kind of adage of like, we're flying the plane, we're building it, we're doing it all at the same time, which again, absolutely true. And again, no one is faulting anyone for that. But to what you said is so incredibly important, which is that as you're flying the plane, document, write it down, put all of this in a spot so that when you're talking to a contracting officer and they're saying something like, hey, why did this happen? You're not being reactive and saying, give me 24 hours for me to go figure out and get the answer for you. But you can immediately say, oh, that's a great question. And I can answer that for you here and here. And this is why we did it. And this was the outcome. And this is why we didn't do it another way. And so again, you're going to hear that theme, I think, a lot, Kyle, between our conversation today, but documentation, having processes, building policies, all of that is abundantly important, regardless of the compliance protocol we're talking about.
Well, I'd say that it's already worth everybody's time with just that quick little tidbit back and forth, guys. So this is great. One quick question from the chat that I think is relevant. Is there an estimated timeline for the updated FAR requirements
It's a good
with
question.
the
They did say
rewrite?
it's going to be in 2026. They did not go and give a specific date for that as of now. I believe that the goal is July. There's a couple of different dates that are in July right now, not just with the FAR, but for a couple of different federal kind of milestones right now. So I would cautiously say July of 2026. That said, though, to not throw one more wrench into this whole thing, agencies can actually have deviations from the FAR. So that's something that's going to be rolling out likely for some time. Is some of the agencies have already started looking at FAR 2.0 and started making deviations of FAR 2.0 for, say, like USDA or again the Department of the Treasury or something of that nature. But it's not fully done. Like for example, DFARS hasn't even seen anything yet. So there's going to be a lot of this rolling out. So unfortunately, while you should eye, like that 2026 milestone that I'm talking about, you're going to need to make sure that you're looking at the rolling repercussions of this because different groups, different departments, they're going to be rolling out their own versions of this. And again, depending on where your work is, depending on where you're trying to conduct, your deals and your opportunities, that's going to be more or less important to you depending on the group.
Well, and
And
I think that's a perfect time just to mention quickly that the idea with these is that this is going to be an ongoing webinar series. So we will be able to look deeper into these different compliances, FAR, CMMC, different parts of them, and answer some specific questions regarding that. So keep an eye out as after this webinar, even for the future of what we're trying to build here with these different aspects in mind. And as we get closer to those potential dates of the rewrite and becoming official. So Shahid, I want to move over to you quickly. We're here to talk a little bit about CMMC, and I know that's a big monster. So can you give me a quick overview of that, why it came around, and what exactly it's trying to protect?
yeah, so we're all Americans trying to protect the homeland. If we're dealing with the Department of Defense slash Department of War, I don't know how to say it, so it doesn't confuse everybody, but I'll keep saying it both ways because I don't want to get into trouble by somebody saying you're not calling it Department of War as well. So DOW, DoD exist primarily to protect the homeland and make sure that we are focused on our enemies not being able to harm us. Now, enemies can harm us in multiple ways. Normally, we just think, okay, they can shoot at us, they can lob missiles at us, but the easiest way that an enemy can harm us today, like literally a kid working in his basement in Nigeria could harm us more than a missile being lobbed at us. How do they do that? They go into digital systems, they go into our warehouses, they could mess with supply chain logistics. Let's just think about like the least thing that we would ever be worried about, and that is that in a logistics supply environment, some kid from Nigeria or South Africa or China got in and just completely messed up the supply data for where supplies were sitting. Instead of being in Minneapolis, the supplies were actually in Alabama, so that when we need it, the system shows us the wrong data. Now you're looking at this and saying, what the heck, man, that can't possibly happen. And not only can it happen, it has been happening. The reason these happen is that the Department of Defense, and like the rest of the government, is focused on their internal staff, especially the enlisted as well as civilians. They are not focused on building large-scale systems. They are supposed to be managing and operating large-scale systems. So they are a massive supply chain evaluator, manager. That's why they acquire things, et cetera, et cetera. And then when they go out and fight the wars or actually doing harm to our enemies, that's when obviously real humans get involved in real work. But during peacetime, during the time when you're not deployed, everything is generally being built by vendors. So whether it's an aircraft carrier, or I like to give an example of a wheel for a aircraft. Well, it doesn't matter whether you're making the small parts for that wheel or whether you're making the aircraft carrier itself. The Department of Defense, hence the United States government, is entrusting us as vendors with the people's data. And what happens is that if you have a very, very small vendor, they're just like, man, I just need to make the wheel well of a aircraft, or I'm just doing, screws that go in. I'm manufacturing screws that go into boxes that go onto a aircraft carrier. Okay, but what happens is that in order for you to produce those screws or produce the wheel well or the aircraft carrier, the U.S. government gives you a bunch of data, specifications, how it should work. Does my satellite connect on 55 gigahertz or 44 gigahertz to connect down to terrestrial equipment? All of that is data. And that data is currently poorly managed, let's just say from a cybersecurity perspective. So many years ago, our friends at DoD said, we got to get this under control. And let's just start with the minimum. And this is the one thing you want to hear is that the CMMC work is not there to punish you as a vendor trying to do work. It's trying to tell that the government is about to entrust you with the people's data, and you have to demonstrate to us that you have your own house in order, like your offices do have doors, that those doors do have knobs, that those knobs do have locks, and those locks are actually turned and locked every night. That's the kind of stuff that they're just asking about. So that's what CMM level 1 is, CMMC level 1 is. Level 2 goes higher. You're doing more classified work, etc. But even if you're not doing any classified work, you might just look and say, hey man, Shahid, this is crazy. We're not doing any classified work. Even non-classified work, unclassified in this particular case, is still sensitive. Sensitive because if it got out, you take one piece of information might not be useful, but you take 3 pieces of information, and that kid sitting in Nigeria or South Africa or Florida, right? It could be somebody trying to get into our systems from within the country. They don't care about whether or not they need to get 50 pieces of information, assemble it, and then use it. But if you don't protect your piece, then the entire network is at risk. And that's why the Department of Defense is saying, whether you're an American company or you're a European company as a partner, everybody's going to have to be minimum at CMMC level 1. 100% of the controls are required at level 1, and then you go to level 2, and then you go to level 3. So we have to first realize this is not punishing us as vendors. It is saying, I'm trusting you. You got to prove that you can earn my trust.
Well, I love that. I think that's a great overview, both from the FAR perspective and the CMMC perspective. So let's talk a little bit about, I got a joint question for both of you. Are there parts of being FAR compliant that may overlap with the CMMC compliance, or should they be, treated as completely separate entities altogether and not looked at while trying to get one or the other?
I think if I can be so bold to start with this, I think one of the best ways to talk about how they do overlap is not necessarily in the specific controls per se. And I mean, I think there is some in there. I think it's I believe it's FAR Part 52 that talks a little bit more about the cyber controls that an organization needs to be looking at. But they definitely overlap in intent, right? The intent of these compliances are 100% the same thing. They are talking about, like, I love the analogy that you were just bringing up there. Like, do you have doors? Do you have knobs? Do you have locks? Are you using them? Like, that is all true because at the end of the day, both FAR and CMMC is the government's way of ensuring that risk managed contractors are getting injected into the federal government, right? Like, we do not want risky folks in the government space. And, the government, they look at everything in how risky is someone. If they can de-risk someone, that's the way that it goes, right? Like, if you can get a way to showcase that you are a tried and true vendor, that if you accidentally do fall down, that you are going to stand up, brush yourself off, and keep walking forward to no harm or risk to the government, that's exactly what they want to see. And so while there's going to be some overlap in these processes, and I think some of the overlap even does come from just the fact that you need to be FAR and CMMC compliant for specific opportunities that you will be able to touch, go after, bid on. Again, kind of going back to the part 15 that I was talking about, I really think a lot of this comes back to intent. And I think like maybe to again kind of drive this a little bit more is FAR is more on the acquisition side, CMMC is more formalized on the cyber side, but FAR is a little bit more of the rules of the game, and CMMC is protecting the stadium of the game, right? And so like that's a way for you to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, and if you just expand that just slightly more to what Luke was saying around the connection between the two. So DFARS, which is the defense side of the FAR, absolutely it's you should see CMMC as an embedded part of DFARS.
Yeah,
Now, what's really
absolutely.
cool is if you want to be good at what you do, and you say you're only dealing with civilian agencies today, but you might want to do defense in a couple of years, you should start CMMC today. Why? Well, because when you go to the civilian guys and they say, how can you trust me? How can we trust you with my data? You're like, well, I'm already CMMC compliant and I don't even have to be. I'm already at level 2 and I don't even have to be. So when you get SOC 2 or CMMC, or, for some of you who are offering cloud-ish software to the government, you will do FedRAMP. What's really nice is CMMC is like one of those things where if you're not doing that, you shouldn't even be in business. Like nobody should trust you with any data if you are not minimally CMMC level 1 compliant. And we have people out in the industry talking about, oh my God, this is going to be so much work. I'm like, what do you mean? You don't actually have doors in your office today? And they're like, no, we have the doors. We just don't lock them. And I'm like, well, that's your problem then. You need to get to locking the doors in your office. And that's all we're talking about with CMMC level 1 is just the blocking and tackling, the basics of how you would secure your own data. And what's really nice is don't treat CMMC as a compliance activity. Treat it, much like FAR and DFARS, treat it as a way of being able to win and retain business, win and
Absolutely.
retain contracts, because that's what the requirement is going to be over the next couple of years.
And to be honest, I mean, the DoD, DOW, they are good at being at the forefront of innovation. I mean, like truly, I have seen, a lot of very interesting stuff come out of that department. And so while CMMC is coming out of DFARS and is really driving all of this right now, right? Uh, the main thing you're going to have to think about is that other people are going to be adopting this. And so to exactly your point, regardless of if you're starting in Fed and then, you're going into DoD, or you have a footprint in DoD, DOW, and you're going to be moving into Fed Civ again. Like while this is more applicable today to the DoD, DOW, I would care to wager that it's not going to be very long before this starts becoming pretty much a requirement across all types of work inside of the federal government, regardless of Fed Civ or DOW. And again, that comes really back down to the point that you just made, which is that honestly, a lot of groups right now are attesting that they're already doing this stuff. So, if you think about that for a second, maybe even think about your organization. Are you doing that without knowing? And are you attesting maybe a bit incorrectly? Trust is a luxury. And unfortunately, the government contracting community has gotten to the point where we just need to be able to showcase a little bit beyond trust, which is a certification right now.
I love that. Well, you guys might have different answers for this next question, but I figured it'd be a fun one. Kind of a chicken or egg, which one comes first? But which compliance did you focus on at the beginning? Do you start with FAR and then move into CMMC? Do you start with CMMC and then go into FAR? Do you work on them both together? What do you think is the best practice?
Shahid, do you want to start with this one?
I would say that if you treat if you're doing DoD specific work today, not general Fed Civ, definitely make sure that you can do minimal CMMC level 1, just so you can get that out of the way and start to think about whether or not you want to look at the DFARS for specific contracts that you want. So first, always number 1, don't think about FAR, DFAR, etc. Number 1, think about what business are you in. If you're in the business of serving the Department of War / Department of Defense today or over time, you will not get any new contracts, nor will you get renewals of contracts if you are not CMMC level 1 minimally, perhaps CMMC level 2, depending on the contract. So it's not really a chicken or egg kind of problem. It is, do we go after that work, and meaning DoD work? If you go to DoD work and you are not CMMC compliant, you will not get DoD work, period, right? So It's just one of those things you got to do.
Period. I like absolutely. I think that that needs to be abundantly emphasized there. I think Kyle, it goes a little bit to like what you were saying. I really do believe that these are parallel tracks because I think if you say what comes first, I mean, I completely agree that honestly, CMMC is just larger right now as we keep joking with it as a monster, right? It's a little bit more intensive. People are a little bit more unfamiliar with the processes revolving around it. Like it likely as an exercise would take you a little bit more time. So, something for you to think about. And so if, you don't have one or two employees dedicated 8, 9 hours a day working on CMMC compliance, it's a process. And so you need someone to help you along with that. And so, whether that be, a group that can help you with it, or whether that be, like you actually are putting kind of a program manager in-house working towards it. Again, just know the time commitment that's associated to CMMC. But I am going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, which is that again, with part 15, there are some really basic FAR things that you must do, right? Like as far as CMMC is concerned, it's very important. But if you do not have a cage code or a UEI, then don't look at any solicitation that's coming out, right? And so, I think that that's where I would argue a little bit where it's, there is some portions of FAR compliance. And again, that's why you have to use the term a little bit lightly, but it is compliance at the end of the day. That's what it is, right? Are you in SAM.gov? Are your reps and certs up to date? Is this something that a contracting officer is going to be able to award against your UEI? That's all really important. But I think the real answer is that if you're integrating both of these types of compliances early on into how you're maintaining and organizing your business, that it just becomes part of your operational days, right? Like every month or so, you're getting a touch point on where we're at with the FAR. There's certain reps and certs we need to look at. Every month or so, you're taking a look at your CMMC compliance, saying, okay, like we've recognized now that people keep forgetting to lock the doors. Like, let's put a protocol in place around who is in charge of locking the doors and when they should be doing that over and over again. And so, again, it kind of does come down to documentation there. Again, those are a couple of different ways for you to view that question, right? Whether it comes from an importance kind of metric against it or a time metric against it. But again, if you're integrating either of them early, then you're doing that. You're doing yourself a favor. And I think I'd end it with just saying you're doing yourself a favor because you're not doing duplicative work too. You'd be surprised just how much of this really crosses over and how much that, even if it doesn't cross over necessarily in a family of controls, just that your people are probably doing this again, especially with small businesses. A lot of these folks are wearing many hats. And so if you're thinking about it holistically, you can build the foundation of the house in a smarter fashion and you're working smarter, not harder, instead of needing to tear all the way back down once you've gotten to floor 2 back to the foundation because you realize that something didn't get set correctly.
Yeah, and if
Well,
I
I
can
think
just
that's a
add
perfect.
one
Oh,
one
go
quick
ahead,
note
Sheet.
there to button up what Luke was saying, it's super important to realize that there are existential questions that you have, meaning if you don't do this, you can't even compete, forgetting everything else. So the existential ones, are you in SAM.gov? Do you have the cage code, etc.? You have to do your existential ones, otherwise you won't exist, right? So you got it, meaning in front of the government. So you do the existential ones. Then there is the contract winning strategies. What is the minimum FAR and other things that you need to do to win a contract? Then there's the execution of the contract after you win it. So you don't have to do everything all at once, like Luke is saying, but do your existential ones first. Because there's a,
Yep.
like if you got CMMC, but you can't exist, you don't exist in SAM.gov, that's bad news for you all around. But use those 3 categories: existential, winning a contract, and then maintaining or executing a contract. And you don't have to do them all simultaneously.
No, that's
And to be
perfect. And
completely
I,
honest, sorry, one last thing is
yeah,
that exactly what you said just kind of aligns to the FAR parts that we were talking about, which again just goes to show everyone that this is not all that crazy. You look at existential, that's a little bit more of like FAR part 19, contract specific is FAR part 15, contract management is FAR part 42. Like again, it really aligns to exactly what we're talking about here, which is a little bit more of, the nebulous entity, contract specific, how the entity operates. And so it's very in line with what you're talking about.
Great.
well, that's a perfect transition into what I had for our next question. Let's say I'm a contractor and I'm working with the government, and I have to get FAR compliant. I have to get CMMC compliant, right? Maybe I already have some internal policies in place that might, connect with both of these things. So, are contractors like me closer to these compliances and being compliant than they realize? And it's just scary to think about because there are all these controls. And as a second question to that, where do you see companies going wrong, treating this as more of a one-time effort versus an ongoing system? Because I think if I'm treating this as an ongoing thing that is continuously upgrading, it's always top of mind versus, oh, we have our audit coming up or we have to get this ready. So we need to make sure that this is done by this particular date kind of thing. So tell me a little bit about what that looks like.
That's a dense question, but I really like it, and I'll take a first stab at it, and then I definitely want to hear the Opsfolio viewpoint here because I think it's going to be riveting. But let me just talk about again. You're going to hear something that I'm saying, and we're probably going to keep saying, right? Documentation, documentation, documentation. I think that this is where. Again, you're saying like what internal policies are affecting. I want to go into that in a second. But are people closer than they think? Yes, because you're doing all of these policies today. You have things in place. You have processes you're running through, albeit sometimes maybe a bit reactive, maybe a little bit chicken with your head cut off. But once you do it once that way, you then have a policy. And even if it is, again, a little bit more reactive, you can think about that last time and say, all right, I'm going to do this very similar. So they're closer than you think because a lot of the time you just don't have that in place. But let's talk about some of the policies that kind of are enabling both of these and things that you need to be thinking about. Incident response, vendor, subcontractor oversight or management in that way, data handling and the way that you're issuing reports or information that's coming from the government out to your people or out to again other entities that are that you're teamed with on the contract, training and ethics, the actual physical security when it comes down to a PIV or CAC card or the GFE that your team is on, change management, or if there's a contract mod that comes out. Again, I could keep going on this list, but I think the thing is that firms are likely thinking about this 70, 80% of all of what I just said, and they have processes for it that they're running in just a reactive manner. So I think it comes back down to, again, you got to get that stuff documented. And all of the types of things that I'm mentioning here are things that come into contract management, FAR Part 42, but at the same time are abundantly relevant for CMMC.
Yeah, and the way to think about this is if you take that tip that I gave you at the beginning is just start in two places. Most of you are using some email of some sort, and you have some shared file drives of some sort. Begin to put your documentation together. Think of it like a data room, like you're continuously preparing for an audit. Like when you know an audit is coming up in 30 days, what are you doing? You're collecting data. Why? Because you think the audit is coming up. And so instead, what you try to do is what Kyle said is you're already very close. You're like Luke said, you're doing the work. So what do? Always assume that you could be audited tomorrow. Well, then
Yeah.
when you are preparing for an audit tomorrow, all you're going to do is try to collect data. So every time data comes in two places, just remember there might be 100 more, but start with these two. Build a data room for your on a shared drive in OneDrive or Box.com or whatever you're using, but always have it ready so that you can drag and drop things into there. Then in the email, same thing. You're starting to build your boxes, and you could even a really good way is the way Luke already laid it out is you could even have FAR Part 15, FAR Part 47, those are your folder names, and you're just dragging and dropping things into there. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this is if I was giving this having this discussion in 2020, I would say, hey, you're doing this because when your auditor comes or your lawyer comes, it'll make things easier. But that's not why you're doing it today. You're doing it for one reason and one reason only is that you're preparing this data for the time you're going to ask AI to grab it all and give you the answers to summarize this, etc., so that when your lawyer arrives or an auditor arrives, you've already got all the data. It's already prepared on a regular basis, right? Every week you're reorganizing. Every month you're looking at the data again. And just say at the end of every month or at the end of every quarter, we're always going to be ready for an audit because we're already pre-collecting the data and we're doing it for AI. You're not doing it for humans. I'll say this a few different ways because a lot of us forget that the world that we're living in now is the auditors that the DoD is now. They're going to have Palantir. They're going to have C3. They're not going to have human beings sitting there reading your materials. They're going to ask you for a PDF download or a zip file and say, give us your data for whatever they want to review. In those cases, if it's part of the contract. It doesn't happen for every contract, but for those contract parts, like for example, CMM level 2 or level 3, when you're going to be third-party audited, don't for a moment believe that your humans are going to be able to fight their AI. Forget it. You will lose every single time. So you have to prepare with your own AI to make sure it catches everything, etc., because they're using Palantir and C3 and the big boys. If you're not doing that and you're not organized enough, then they're going to be able to find all the little things because they just have a lot more resources to do audits than you do to have audit preparation. So just remember, collect your data, put it in your emails, etc. Start marking it with the FAR and other areas. And of course, you can reach out to help, whether it's Kyle, Luke, myself, to say, okay, how do we organize things here? And you will find that as you begin to organize it, there's one thing that, so I've worked in the medical device world for a long time. And one thing we always used to say to each other, because in the medical device world, you have to be ready for an audit. Like the FDA could literally show up at your manufacturing facility at any time, no announcements. They just show up and ask you questions. So there's no audit preparation, for example. So what we normally used to say to each other is, if you didn't write it down, it did not happen, right? So just like Luke is saying, you're doing the work anyway. All you're not doing is sometimes you're not writing it down. But if it's an email, you're writing it down. Collect the email. No need to go do extra work. If you're emailing it, you're just going to do an email search. The discovery and other things happen through there. So it is like Kyle asked the perfect question, which is, am I already doing it? Luke said it. You're probably 70, 80, 60, whatever percent there, but you're not documenting it. For sure, you're not organizing it. And that's your biggest flaw.
Well, with all these moving pieces, assessments, documentation, even trying to automate some of these things, I know that there are tools out there, things that you can do in order to help with these, but I'd love for you to take a moment now to just walk us through, from Osfolio's perspective, what a contractor would do to start their CMMC level one journey.
Mhm. Great. And Luke, give us some input. I know you used our tools, and Ravi is going to join us to give us a quick demo. But what we'll show you is that in order to do a lot of this stuff, there is existing tooling. We'll just show you ours, which is a free tool that you guys can do basic kinds of assessment. But tell us, Luke, as Ravi brings up the screen, how is your journey through it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I think that this is why this is relevant, right? We keep talking about like, how is this all interconnected? Well, I work in the FAR, but CMMC is abundantly relevant to that. Again, and the DFARs too. So to me, I think it's very appropriate to see, how does this operate? How would someone that I'm working with, one of my clients, one of my friends, need to go about this process? So yeah, absolutely. I thought that it was really relevant for me to run through this example. So the Opsfolio platform, it's really great. This self-assessment that you're able to run with here is just such a good way for you to start understanding the unknown and making it known more than anything else. I think that that's something I run into a lot right now in this space, is people say, I understand I need CMMC compliance. I understand that it's 11 days past when the initial, you need to be CMMC ready, but I still am not really sure what to do. And I still think I have some time for it. Well, again, you may have a little bit of time before you really have the hammer coming down on you. But again, it's less time than you think. And, one of the great things about this tool is, again, it gives you a starting point. And I think that that's the thing that people need to understand more than anything else. CMMC is dense. We keep talking about it. Robbie's going to show us how dense, even some of the questions are. But what I recommend anyone to do here is to just take a stab at it, right? We're all in the space of IT and government and things like that. Look at this as an MVP. You might need to talk to your CTO. You might need to get some input from your HR person. You might need to meet with a couple of other founders or, C-suite executives. But if you have a chance to potentially run with this link, go ahead, take the assessment, take the report, treat it as an MVP. And even if you end up going to walk into someone's, to walk into a meeting saying, hey, we're not locking the doors and that's an issue here. And then your HR professional says, no, we are locking the doors. I have a protocol that someone is checking them at 4:49 every Friday. Do it. Then you recheck the report and now you realize that that's not a problem anymore. And so anyways, that's the one thing I want to showcase really here, is that this is a really incredible tool for you to start getting some knowledge and understanding. And you should really treat it as a way for you to understand the baseline of where your organization is at.
Awesome. And so, Ravi, we can see your screen. Please go ahead and begin showing people the demo.
Great. So let's shift from talking about CMMC to actually taking some steps to get prepared. So I'm going to show you the workflow that we built so that any defense contractor who needs clarity, documentation, and visibility on their CMMC readiness can get it in under an hour, actually. So we'll start on the login page. This has some info about the tool. If you have an account, you can sign in here. If you need to sign up, just press the sign up button and it'll take you to the sign up flow. So after you're inside, here's what it'll look like. The first page will be a level determination questionnaire. So this will help you decide if you need CMMC level 1 or level 2, by asking some questions about the sensitivity of the information on your DoD contracts, whether you're processing FCI, CUI, or what. But we'll just assume we're going with level 1 CMMC and start with the level 1 self-assessment. So the first step is filling out your company information, organization name, title, your contact info, nothing too complicated here. Then you'll want to save and continue. Then we'll get to the actual questionnaire. So this questionnaire was developed by our compliance experts. We mapped the CMMC controls, combined it with our expertise in IT implementation to determine the exact questions we need to map your environment and determine readiness. So this turns what used to take most contractors days or weeks of guesswork into a guided 30-minute clarity path. So you'll go through and answer these questions to the best of your ability and knowledge. And if you're not sure, just click on the help icon or use our Ask AI feature. So let's go over an example question. Let's look at account review. So account review frequency. How frequently are user accounts reviewed for validity and appropriate access? So meaning if you have different system accounts, like people who can access your Windows AD Active Directory system, how often are you reviewing them? Is that monthly, quarterly, annually, or another frequency? If you're not sure exactly what this means, check out the help option. Regularly review user accounts to verify access is appropriate and remove or adjust accounts as needed. And if you're still not sure, you can always go to Ask AI. How do I review account access?
Yeah, and while this answer is coming up, what we've done is we've built a custom AI. So the answers that you would get if you went to ChatGPT or something would be a lot broader, but these are actually tuned. So the answers are coming. We've taught it about FAR, DFAR. We've taught it about CMMC, and so when it's coming back, it's getting you. It's going to still give you a somewhat generality because it doesn't know your company yet, but it narrows it to what is most important for CMMC or FAR and DFAR requirements.
Yep, and so you can just review this information once it spits it out, and that should help you answer the question. So you'll go through, answer these questions after every page, hit save and continue. And you'll do that on every page of questionnaires. There's a few pages of questionnaire. Once you get to the last page, there'll be an option to view report after you've saved your last answers. So go ahead and click on this, view report. Oops. Let's just log in really quickly. I'm going to stop the share while I pull up that login.
Yeah, and
sorry about this.
That's a great. So as Ravi brings that up, what will the reason why we needed a login is we want to protect your data. Like you want to be careful to give in a secure system. You're giving it literally information about your company and how your company operates and how its policies and everything else is set up. So we're being very serious about it's not. It seems like a very lightweight early assessment, but it's actually doing a full review of your requirements. And moving forward, you'll have that account and you can come back to it. And remember, Luke was saying a little while ago that you may start off a little bit by putting in a couple of pieces of information. And then you want to get more data from somebody else. Then you come back to it and add more information. Then you come back to it and you add more information. So the total amount of time may be only a few hours. It could be 30 minutes, but you may need to spend 4 days going to each of the different people and collecting that information. Now, as you get this going, the idea is that if you're a subcontractor yourself, you should do this work on your own and then make it go forward. If you're a prime, though, we've got a system set up so that you can actually set up your system so that you can say, okay, I've got 5 subs of my own. I'm going to send them these particular links. We'll have the subs enter all of that information and then come back and be able to present that as well. So Ravi, did you log back in?
Yep, I just got it back up and I'm sharing my screen again.
Yep.
Just a minute.
So as the screen comes back up, I'll let you know once it's visible. So think about it as if you're the sub, you're entering all of your own information. It'll tell you where it's lacking in policies. That's what Ravi will show you in a second. Then you're going to need policies and procedures. We've got that covered for you as well, and Ravi will show you that in a second. But remember that this report, and Ravi, the screen is up now. So go ahead and walk through this report, and then we'll summarize the other stuff.
Yep. So this is our report with our readiness scores. That's the most important information here. And 86 in school, that might be a B grade, but actually you need to have a 100% here to be 100% CMMC compliant for level 1. So it'll tell you below here where we're not yet compliant. So by family, dive into the breakdown. And this will tell you exactly where your gaps are and exactly what you need to remediate that. So there's some additional information down here and your top risk areas. So this is, for most teams, this is the first time they've ever seen their complete CMMC posture presented in a single snapshot. So that's the kind of payoff you get from going through the self-assessment questionnaire. So one common weak point we see for diagnosing these CMMC gaps is needing to have CMMC ready policies. So let's head over to our policy generator to generate policies that are actually customized to your environment. So here you'll just fill out your company information. So your name, email, approver name, business size, and it automatically generates policies with that information. So you'll know all you need to do is actually fill out these fields or change these fields, and it dynamically updates the policies. See, it says policy data auto saved. That means that the policies have been dynamically updated with that new information. So let's check out our customized policies. So this is paperwork that most companies put off for months, but you can get it instantly. So we actually pre-fill these with our common, with our custom IT configurations that are based on our opinionated CMMC reference architecture. And that allows you to take our CMMC readiness posture and port it into your environment. But if you want more customization over the settings you choose, you can go back out to the advanced options. And here's everything you need to make the policies completely tailored to your environment. Yep, so just by going to this tool, you'll have your policies ready to go. By filling out our self-assessment, you'll have a complete readiness path. So Shahid, could you tell us, once somebody sees where their gaps are, what can they do to work with us to go farther in their path if they want some help getting remediated?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you hit 100% over there, you're ready to go. You don't need us at all. But you hit 85% or 50%. And like Ravi said, it's very important. It's pass fail. That percentage just tells you how much you're complete. But the DoD wants to hear you're 100% compliant. Now, getting to 100%, if you're a small to medium-sized company, it's not hard to get there, but you need humans to help you. And so we've given you, we can also give you as part of our service, so you can come to us and say, okay, we're at 85%. It didn't cost you anything to learn that. So the gap analysis, et cetera, you can do completely on your own. But then you say, okay, you need help. That initial assessment tells us, and then we can give you like a package price to say, all right, in order to get you up to 100%, here are the things that we need to do. And then you get one of these. This is our real life, what we call our hub. So our CMMC hub, where we can track everything, who's doing the work, et cetera. So like Luke and Kyle mentioned, as you're doing this work anyway, if you have a system where you're tracking all of this, then it just becomes easier. So when somebody comes in, they have everything in one place. So you can use this hub of ours, which is just given to you as part of our solution, because it's easier for us to work with you by knowing everything going on rather than going through everything in email. This is all tracked for you. It's all captured in part of a system so that when you come to get your audit done, or you need the packaging for your government review, it's always available to download as a particular package. We do your POAMs, we help you with your IT governance, and a lot of the other FAR things that Luke mentioned, DFAR and FARs, we can actually help you just track all of those, because that's half the battle. Who's doing the work? Are you doing it or not? Is there documentation, et cetera? Luke and Kyle, we'll hand it back over to you guys from here.
Well, perfect. That's a wonderful explanation of that product, and
It's
you could see
great.
the value there, and I could see it in myself. But just to wrap things up here as we're getting towards the end, I wanted to ask you guys. Now, we've seen the general overview, we've seen kind of a product demonstration, and as part of being compliant in these different ways, there's usually some kind of audit or follow up that you have to adhere to, right? So, can you speak a little bit to what it looks like after you become compliant and if there's any intersection between the check-ins with FAR, the check-ins with CMMC, and what that looks like?
Yeah, good question. I'll try to make my point kind of quick here, and I think the main thing is just compliance needs to be ongoing. A compliance posture is not a static. It's not a static thing. It's not like a static document, right? It is dynamic. It is ever evolving. There are things that are happening, and so with that, you should be checking in a preventative maintenance type fashion. Are we evolving with things that we need to be? Is there something new in a contract that we recently got that we didn't have a year ago when we were looking at it that we now need to make sure that we're doing on the regular? I think the thing for you to think about realistically is that a yearly checkup shouldn't even be really looked at least in the far sense, as a yearly checkup. It's like DCA compliance, Kyle, right? Something that we didn't get a chance to dive into today, but there's certain compliance that really is just ongoing, and for it to be easier for you to see it as ongoing, you should have it in your daily protocols. I always talk to my teams like this, and then maybe this is the last thing I can say on it, is that compliance doesn't usually win you proposals, but compliance will sure get you tossed from proposals.
Yeah, and one positive way to think about that is the negative way of looking at compliance is that it's a bunch of work and it doesn't buy us anything, and damn government needs us to do all of this. Or you look at it as assurance on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. I'm assuring that the people in my company are doing their jobs, that we're doing it in a trustful, ethical manner, and that through an assurance lens here, what you're just doing is making sure that you're documenting everything over time. Now, when you go to when you go to sam.gov, you do your reps and certs, right? You're checking
Mhm.
things off, but they never ask you to upload anything. That is what's going to change. The reason why they don't want you to upload anything is they don't have enough humans to do this review. Next year, 2 years from now, by the end of this decade, they're going to have AI systems and they're going to ask you for all of this. So it becomes worse and worse over time if you're not technically astute on your own, because they have AI and you have humans. We know who's going to win that battle. But if you have a minimum level of technology support, which is collecting your digital data, preparing your data, and then using AI to help you with presenting it and summarizing it, etc., that's how I would go. And the good news is you don't have to buy anything more than regular ChatGPT or Gemini, etc., as a good starting point. But that's where we can help you, whether it's Kyle on the DCAA side, us on the Opsfolio, specifically with CMMC or other cybersecurity. We do a bunch of other
Yeah.
cybersecurity compliances as well.
Well, great. That's, I think, a perfect way to end things here. We appreciate the conversation and the answer to the questions that you provided for us, Luke and Shahid. We do have 1 minute. If there are any burning questions from the attendees, you can just use the raise your hand function. I can actually unmute you, or you could just put it into the question and answer session, and we can finish off with a question from the audience. We do plan on doing more of these webinars in the future. So some of the questions we got in the Q&A, we might actually turn into a full webinar here and kind of dive deeper with each of those things. So does anybody from the audience have any specific questions they wanted to ask before we wrapped up?
There is one question in there. The question says, does FAR 15 have any rules about AI during proposal submissions? At the moment, they haven't called out AI or not AI. What they do require is you're doing reps and certs, and whether you use AI or a lawyer or whatever, whoever is signing still is responsible for all the data. So the way to look at it is use AI as if it's one of your colleagues. Colleague has prepared some material. The colleague could be wrong. The lawyer could be wrong. Our information to you could be wrong sometimes. So you want to go through and verify that, and that's what they care about most. And there's another question: how long does the self-assessment typically take? If you know all the answers, you can do it within 30 minutes. But sometimes you don't know all the answers, and you might have to collect it from different organizations. So overall, set aside maybe 4 hours as a cumulative time to do that assessment. and then assume that if you're a very, very small company, you can get all of it done within half an hour to an hour. But let's say you're small-ish or a small or medium size, it might take a week, 2 weeks, all depending on how long it takes for you to collect that information. But it's not more than probably 4 hours cumulative in most cases for the small-ish companies.
Yep, absolutely. I think the last thing that I'll add on to this, just because this has been a riveting conversation, is that to the point of the does FAR 15 Part 15 have anything about AI during proposal submission? So the FAR was actually written and really effective in the 1980s, like early 1980s, and so it was actually much more before the AI boom. Honestly, more before really commercial internet and cloud computing. That's part of the reason why we're doing this whole modernization right now. Why the administration's doing that is so it can take into account much more modern metrics and modern tools. But I think the one thing I would say is that's why going all the way back to something I said on kind of question one here to tie it together, section L and M of a solicitation is very important because sometimes right now I've seen this in a couple of different contract vehicle and definitive work type bids and RFPs. You have to disclose that you've used AI in your proposal. It doesn't prohibit by any means, but it does say you should disclose and please disclose how you have done it. So again, that is why it's so important for you to be reading all of this and for you to stay up to date and not just blindly trusting even things that we're saying and making sure that you're going to learn about it on your own.
Yeah, great points.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for the discussion. You were awesome as panelists. If anybody has any questions regarding CMMC, regarding FAR, even DCAA, which we didn't touch about today, feel free to reach out to myself, to Luke, or to Shahid. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have and be a resource for you as we move forward. Like I mentioned at the beginning, this is going to be an ongoing webinar series. So keep an eye out for the next date that we're going to plan and look for an email for that or check LinkedIn for those updates. So thank you all for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks so much for having us, Kyle. Really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you guys for being here.